Mike, let's start with what we know. Given GDP, we should have seen about a 6% increase in the staffing industry last year. SIA reported another down year for the industry. When we look at past data, since 2022, the industry is down about 20%. It seems to me like the industry is sort of underachieving and underperforming, right? We can't close new orders. We're not necessarily recruiting at a high level. We're not increasing or decreasing, rather, our time to fill as it relates to hiring. And we're sort of passing the blame, right? So we're either blaming the market as an industry, or sales teams are blaming recruiters. Recruiters are blaming the sales team. I want to get your thoughts on accountability in the staffing and recruiting industry. Why is there an accountability breakdown when we think about the staffing and recruiting industry?
It's an interesting question because, we had about 12 great years of GDP growth, and along with, obviously COVID, there's a hiccup there, and the staffing industry grew with it. And so, but one of the things that I really noticed was that really good business development efforts, really strong sales organizations are going out there landing new clients, or even the ability to penetrate new accounts and gain wallet share, was a discipline that was atrophying over those 12 years. It didn't have the same sense of urgency across the board. They just weren't quite, it was just easier, I think. So I think that's kind of natural. And when something like that happens, you can say as much as you want that what you're doing isn't enough, but if you're still growing, you're not going to listen. It's just the way it is. And so there is definitely a part where I think a really strong sales oriented culture, a really strong executives that focus on a sales strategy that could be executed properly. Because keep in mind, in 12 years, you have VP levels that have never seen a recession. Right. And so when they see something like that, they've never seen it before. They've never been part of it before. And so it's new to so many layers within that organization. They don't know how to respond. So the accountability does start with leadership, because leadership has to learn the business in a different way. They have to learn new skills themselves. They have to learn how to hire differently. They need to train differently, all those things. Right. There's no question there's systemic issues. And in executive forum, we talked about the fact that, look, we're not growing. There's been a split between GDP growth and staffing growth. And there's a lot of talk about that a lot of it's government spending, and that's why, versus private sector growth. But I think there's just a lot of people are just waiting, a lot of uncertainty, and the market is waiting. But I'll tell you one thing, the firms that stayed aggressive and didn't get complacent for those 12 years did okay. They did fine. They went down a little bit, but they picked it back up again. And I can't stress enough, it all starts with that. The lifeblood of a staffing firm, the only way to own your own future direction of the company, is to have a great sales organization. That's it.
I had a call with a client just this past week who said, we don't know how to sell because we've been order takers for so long that we've never had to sell. Are you seeing that quite a bit too?
Well, absolutely. And look, I don't blame them. I would probably be in the same situation, right? I mean, because you just kind of, the thing about sales, and one thing I tell people is that it's truly within staffing, it's truly the only proactive thing we do. If you're managing orders, you're responding to what's coming in, and you kind of get into that, versus if you're a salesperson, you're creating opportunity a lot of times out of nothing. That it wasn't there before. And that's a whole different mentality. It's a whole different way of looking at things, a whole different way of, getting ready for the day, a whole different way of dealing with rejection. Like if you're taking needs coming in, like you're not getting rejected. You can always blame the recruiter if you got rejected. So it's like, but when you're out there as a salesperson, you're on your own. People are going to not want to talk to you. That's just the way it is. And it is a whole different world. When we look at accountability, for example, we all have these management systems, and I believe in management systems. And that's where I started this business, was balanced scorecard management. So that's how I started my consulting business. But it is a tool. That's all. It's simply a tool, and it's a guidepost. That's all it is. And the math of the business, how a desk needs to be run, the tools that people use, the approaches they take, all that at the desk level, that's all the stuff that has to change for real production to actually increase. So, It's interesting times, and people don't know their math anymore. They used to know I make this many calls, I can get 8 to 10 meetings a week, I can get this many job orders, I can hit my goal, and you could check it. And now the math's completely broken. I can only get 3 meetings a week, all that kind of stuff. And so now the math doesn't work anymore. You have to rejigger the desk and figure out how to do it differently.
Hey, it's Brad taking a short break to tell you about an offer exclusive to listeners of Take the Stage. 30 minutes of strategic marketing consultation with me, completely free. Hey, whether you're looking to drive more sales or more job applications, I want to help. Visit bit.ly/stage offer. Pick a time that works best for you. That's it. Again, whether you want to drive more applications or more job orders, I want to help. That's bit.ly/stage offer. All right, let's get back to the show.
Yeah, the data that we saw recently is that it takes 17 for 20 touches for an individual to fundamentally know a company exists. So whether you're selling t-shirts or you're selling staffing services, 17 to 20 touches just for you to know that a company exists, not to get the order, not to get the ask for an order, just to know Brad's widget company is on this planet. And the same data, Mike, that I saw is that 90% of sales reps give up at the 4th attempt.
Yeah.
So mathematically, we know it takes 17 to 20 touches for someone to know your company exists, but 90% of us are giving up at the 4th attempt because of, and why I think is because of rejection, because of hearing no so consistently. We're human at the end of the day. And if you don't have thick skin in staffing and selling staffing services, it can really eat at you quickly.
Well, I'll tell you, like, I started this business as a recruiter, right? And I hit the ground running. I hit the ground running. I was doing great because I was lucky, basically. But when you're actually being successful, you don't sit back and think about how lucky you are. You think you're good. I'm good at this, right? And so then of course that stopped because luck runs out. And then you're at this crossroad decision. And the crossroad is, am I willing to really understand I have to take a step back. I have to look back at what I'm currently doing and go in a different direction or not. And that's a really hard thing to do. And that's why I think like early success a lot of times is an indicator of a lack of resiliency in the future. And so a lot of these folks, like you said, never had that before. And so they feel like 4 rejections is almost insurmountable, because that doesn't line up with their past experience versus somebody who's brand new. Like that's why so many people hire college grads, because they're coming in like, they have no idea. They're getting ready. It's just normal to them. And that's why you can put them through that ringer and get them ready for that. But it's hard for Salesforce, it has so much success, to have to go back and rebuild. Man, it's one of the hard. I've seen salespeople do it, and I respect the daylights out of them. I think it's one of the hardest things to do in this industry.
Who owns that accountability in terms of training a sales team how to deal with that resiliency? Does that come from top-down leadership? Is that a sales manager? Is that self-driven? Who owns that accountability?
I mean, I think the understanding of the reset does start with the line level, with the chief executive officer, I should say, and that there has to be a reality check, among the team. Also understanding that, when a chief executive officer, it's okay to communicate that, look, I have to do my job differently. So you're going to see me doing things differently as well. So we all have to change. And that cascade, of change goes downward to the VP and that director level and that line level manager. I did a session with Jeff Bowling of old Delta companies. He's great with accountability. And, the weekly reviews with the line level manager and things like that. But he also really stressed that level above the line level manager to be highly accountable to the desk as well. And that when somebody is really struggling, you don't sit there and look at the numbers only tell you somebody is struggling. So you can see that they're struggling, but you have to get into the desk and you have to figure out what they're doing. Maybe you have to listen to their calls. Maybe you have to make some calls for them. Maybe you have to put a submission together. Maybe you need to call a client for them. Maybe you need to go on a joint sales call. So you have to get in the trenches, because it doesn't matter what the ratios say and whether it's in a pie chart or a bar graph, that's fine. But in the end, it's like, how do you take that data and implement improvements and coach your people up? That's the part that I think is really missing.
I had a call the other day that stopped me in my tracks. It was actually the same call where somebody had said that their team doesn't know how to sell, right? They don't have a sales system. They've been order takers. And they said, but we do have one sales rep who is absolutely crushing it in their market. And I said on the call, well, what are they doing? And the person said, I don't know. I said, what do you mean? You have a whole sales team over here and you're saying that you're struggling right now and somebody's doing really, really well. No one has thought to grab a cup of coffee with this person and figure out what they're doing?
Yeah.
And it was so shocking and so astonishing.
Yeah, that they should at least know like how they're managing their desk, what they're doing, how they're organizing their day. What are they, what are they saying? Things like that. That kind of the tactics. How are they landing the meeting? Right. Once they get that person on the phone, how are they actually translating that to a meeting or translating that to an order? I would be all over that to try to learn the tactics of what that person is doing.
Exactly right.
But what's funny about it, that what it'll tell you is that there is something called talent, right? Like I had a great salesperson in Greenville, South Carolina. She had this great Southern accent, and she was on the phones constantly, but man, she could tell anybody anything and they loved her for it because her demeanor was so great. It was so professional. She connected personally so quickly with people that if I tried to do half the things that she did or have to try to connect the way it would fail miserably. So there are some people that just naturally can connect with somebody and people want to work with them. And that's just called talent. But you're right in the sense of like, yeah, at least understand, okay, well, how many calls are you making, or, what kind of outreach are you doing? And, what are you saying to get meetings, and, that type of thing. Or absolutely. You certainly don't just look at it and wonder and just talk about it. Yeah, for sure.
Well, that's nice for that person.
Yeah.
Mike, when you think about accountability and top-down accountability, how often should senior level leadership be meeting with individuals throughout the organization?
So it's a really good question. And I think as with anything, it probably does depend a little bit on how much change is actually going through the organization. So if there's a lot of change, either structurally or the strategy or something like that, then a monthly, and when you say senior, I'm talking about the CEO level, like,
sure.
CEO level communication on a monthly perspective makes a lot of sense because, there's a lot of change going on. You want to update those people on the change, and you want to make sure that, you're staying connected. And even with fast growing companies, sometimes it's appropriate too, because the other thing that's happening in fast growing firms is that your legacy employees, because you're growing, are actually feeling further and further removed from the chief executive just because it's a larger company. And they're not able to go out to lunch with the CEO and things like that. So even in fast growing situations, having those type of consistent communications, I think makes sense. You can certainly get away in a more stable environment. You can get away with quarterly. And that's fine as well.
Are you struggling to attract clients in today's competitive staffing market? Haley Marketing's newest ebook, SEO and Content Marketing, a modern guide for staffing firms, shows you how to dominate search rankings and generate qualified leads effortlessly. With proven strategies, this guide reveals how to rank higher, create content that converts, and future-proof your marketing with AI insights. Written by the team with over 25 years of staffing industry expertise, this free guide is your roadmap to success in 2025. Get your free copy now at haleymarketing.com/ebooks. Again, that's haleymarketing.com/ebooks. All right, let's get back to the show. When we think about then going from across department, should there be an accountability from team member to team member? Should those check-ins be happening as well?
Yeah. So obviously, like there's, the best type of accountability is peer accountability that happens on the day-to-day. Like if you kind of look at it maybe in a, this way, it's like day-to-day accountability. The optimal view of day-to-day accountability is peer-to-peer accountability. That's the best type of accountability. If you looking at week over week accountability, where you're looking at performance over a period of time, then manager to employee accountability works best. You're not going to have a peer go look at somebody's numbers for the week and say, hey, you missed your submittal numbers by 2 last week. That's not going to happen.
Right.
But what they're going to say is like, hey, why didn't you cover my job? You said you were going to cover it. Right. So that weekly type of accountability is really kind of line level to employee accountability. But it's all incredibly important. And I would argue the real accountability that really drives performance is peer-to-peer accountability. Like if you're going to ask me, like, which is what would I want the strongest, would no question be peer-to-peer. That's the sign of the healthiest culture you could possibly have.
Why is that?
Well, mainly because it really, it drives the culture of the organization. When you look at, the way I look at culture, it's kind of the definition I kind of go with, or the lens I look through, is the unwritten rules that drive behavior with one another. So if I'm holding people accountable, that becomes the rule set of how we work together. And so we're more likely to pay closer attention to detail. We're more likely to live up to our obligations. We're more likely to put those extra 10 calls in. We're more likely to take that call list back home with us. We're more likely to ask those additional questions to those candidates. You're not going to get from a management accountability. That's never going to happen. Those are cultural expectations, right? Where you don't want to let people down, when you want to live up to the standards that you hold each other to. And that is the foundation. That's everything. That's why when you have a performer, let's say, even if if somebody's a top performer, if they are a tumor on the culture, if they're just cancerous on the culture, you can't keep them, because trust begins to break down with that team, and you lose that entire dynamic of mutual accountability, and the culture of performance just atrophies and falls apart. And I'm telling you, there is nothing harder than fixing a culture in a company. It's the hardest thing that I do.
Where do you start? So if someone's listening right now and they think they have one of those team members who is sort of that poison pill in the culture, but they're a high performer, where do you even get started there?
I'll tell you that it's really hard. I've had to do it. And everybody that I talked to when I wrote Breaking Through had to do it. And it was all kind of a crossroads event for every single one of them. Is that you have to be willing to make that decision. First, you have to be willing to have the difficult conversations and stop compromising and trying to compromise around this individual and create, it can't be done. It's just no manager is smart enough or good enough to be able to manage around a terminally cancerous employee. It just can't be done. So unless that employee is willing to change the behavior, then that person, which you can do it, try it. I'm not saying not to try, but you have to be willing to let go. And I'll tell you something. You will be better off. You're going to imagine all these terrible things that are going to happen. You're going to imagine you're going to lose all this gross profit. I'm telling you right now, it never happens that way. It is never as bad as you imagine it. It never is. And then what happens is this relief comes throughout the organization. And the only thing that you're going to hear from people is not like, I can't believe you did that. What you're going to hear is what took you so long. And it's going to make you feel worse, because that made me feel worse, because that's what happened to me. It's like, what took you so long? It's like, you can't play defense as a manager. You just can't. It doesn't work.
It's a good thought. You need to be on the offensive side of things. You need to constantly be thinking about what's next, thinking about how to grow, and most importantly, how to keep the strength of the team intact.
Right, exactly. And the thing is, this is the thing, the values with the mission, vision, and values, and the kind of the three-legged stool. You kind of talk about it. People talk about it's whatever. It's kind of cheesy. What is it? I'm telling you, this stuff's incredibly important. And if you have values within an organization and they're stated values, and you as a chief executive say these are the values, and you are willing to have a price tag on those values. Hey, these values only count if you make under $700,000 of gross profit. They're not values at that point. There's nothing transcendent anymore. Then everything is up for negotiation. And your people are watching you. Don't think they're not watching you. When you're a leader, you are a fishbowl, and they are watching your body language. They're watching how you handle things, and they're talking about it, and they're diagnosing it. All that stuff's happening. And so when you're not willing to make difficult decisions, what are they talking about? The fact that you're not willing to make difficult decisions. And it undermines you as a leader.
It's a great point, Mike. Mike, you've had the opportunity to coach hundreds of staffing firms throughout your time in the industry. What are some of the biggest red flags you've seen when walking into a new organization thinking this company is in trouble?
I think that probably the earliest indicators, when I'm talking to people, is that they talk defensively. And they're talking in terms of trying to position themselves in the best light, like they're almost on a sinking ship. So they're trying to protect their own reputation and things like that. But I think that also goes up to the CEO level, right? And that's where it's terminal. When the CEO is they don't realize that the company is a reflection of them. It is a reflection. And so when they start talking about the company as a third party, or they start talking about the company like I talk about the company as a consultant, right? That's a problem, because especially in staffing, the company and the CEO are intricately linked. That's why when CEOs, they try to sell the company, so many of them at the last minute back off because it's like selling a member of their family. It's like, it's that personal, right?
Right.
And when you have that kind of disassociation, that means they're disassociated from the employees, and the employees can't really feed off that manager. They can't connect with that CEO. And in staffing, that connection is incredibly important. The other thing is like when you walk into an office, maybe it's different nowadays because it's, but I know when I started, and there's more electronic communication nowadays, but like if it's like a library, and you walk in and nobody's talking, there's no energy, that's the other death nail. The other part is like, this is the other thing. Like if you sit in on a morning meeting, what's the purpose of a morning meeting? Morning meeting is to get people focused on what they need to focus on and fired up to do it. That's two things. That's it. But if they're sitting there and they're in the ATS and they're going in, they're talking about that and whether this is the right or that's right, and they're spending like 30 minutes talking about the data and not talking about closing deals, you got a problem because they're thinking bureaucratically. They're not thinking entrepreneurial, right? They're not thinking about closing deals. They're just thinking about the data. And that's the other sign that it's just things have gone sideways.
Let's flip that. So again, you've worked with hundreds of companies in the industry. What are some of the best indicators that a company is poised for growth and success that you've seen?
Oh, this is great. So I tell this story once in a while. Years ago. It's probably 10 years ago. I was at SIA.
Gather around, everyone. Mike's got a
Forum.
story for us.
Well, and so, there are people that will come in and come to me and say, hey, can you talk or whatever? And, I can get a pretty good indicator of what's going on. And Mark Eldridge approaches me from Alcu. And Mark had been growing, obviously, at that point. But he wanted to talk to me about whether or not I could help them, right? Grow faster. So we go outside, sit down, and he brings in about his top 4 people, basically. And I sat down with them. And you could feel it. You could feel that this team was just connected and focused and ready to go. Like I could get a sense for sitting down with the team and whether there's a gap or what's going on. And this was probably the most aligned team I had experienced sitting down. And it was because it was with Mark, but it's also your key employees, those people that are right underneath the CEO. And the closer they are and the tighter they are, and in terms of, not just in terms of the personal relationship, but their desire to build, like they all had this desire to build and just to grow and all those type of things. And I met with them for about an hour and I looked at Mark. I said, I don't think I can help. I think you're doing great. Because the thing is about what I do is disruptive, right? And so, and I'm a son of a physician. My dad always had this wooden statue on his desk, and it was in German, but it said like it was something around first do no harm, the kind of the part of the Hippocratic Oath, right? And I was like, and I've always kind of taken that because like in staffing, you can screw things up really fast if you don't know what you're doing, really fast. And so when that was the case, I was like, man, I am not. You guys are great. Don't just keep doing what you're doing, and you'll be fine.
Do you want to land more clients and close more deals in 2025? Haley Marketing is offering big savings to help staffing firms like yours grow. Get $1,000 off targeted marketing campaigns, free tools to track your hottest leads, and no setup fees on services that help your company get found online. Plus, we'll even help you stay in touch with prospects for free. But you need to act fast. These deals end June 30th. You can visit bit.ly/Bialy offer to find out more information. Again, that's bit.ly/Bialy offer for more information. All right, let's get back to the show. It's interesting how well you can feel a functioning team and a high-performing team as opposed to a dysfunctional team, right? So we're based in Buffalo, New York over here. You look at a team like the Buffalo Bills, the team culture is very, very strong. You look at a team like the Buffalo Sabres, who probably couldn't beat a JV hockey team right now. You think it's a completely dysfunctional locker room, right? And you can feel that. I don't know the team. I'm not working around the locker room, but you can feel that because of the product that they're putting out on the ice or on the field. And look in a lot of ways, please.
Look what happened in Miami Heat. Same thing happened. Like they trade Jimmy Butler and the culture just falls apart. Sorry to interrupt, but you're absolutely right.
Yeah. And I think we look at that a lot in sports, or we see bands fall apart because the front man or whoever it is has some sort of ego driven, whatever it might be. And the band falls apart because of the culture, or we see that in sports because of, again, the locker room culture. But we don't often tie that to our businesses, and we don't tie that to, well, why are we not succeeding? Because of the locker room because of what's going on right here within our four walls.
Yeah. Which to me is the only reason, there's something about this business, right? That it gets its claws into people and they don't leave. It's a tough business. Like if you look at it, it's like, what are we doing to ourselves? Like it's a really, really hard business. But I think it's because, first of all, there's a lot of fun people in this business. The service that we provide is really amazing. But I think that the cultures that kind of get generated within these companies and things like that are really, can be really great and provide a lot of satisfaction, so,
I was just reminded of a book. Go ahead, please.
Yeah. No, you go ahead. It's all good.
I was going to say, I was just reminded of a book and I was trying to look it up quickly because I haven't read it in a while, by John Gordon. You win in the locker room first. And it is the 7 C's to build a winning team in business, sports, and life. And as we're now talking about building this high performing team versus a fully dysfunctional team that is falling apart, I was called back to that book as you were talking, and we were talking about sort of that dynamic that you see in the locker room. But in a lot of ways, we have to paint that analogy to staffing and recruiting firms because we do win in the locker room first. We win as a team before we can have the product on the court, on the field, on the ice.
100%. That's one of the reasons why there's 22,000 staffing firms in the U.S. is because grit can get you somewhere in this business, and a great culture can get you somewhere in this business. You can outmaneuver the big companies. You can do what you can do, so, but a lot of that is built on culture. It is the linchpin that holds everything together. And you have a culture, whether it's intentional or not. And you have to decide, what is it? Like, what is my culture? And it's really, and I will tell you, like, so when I get brought into these situations and the cultural situations, it's, they're tough, right? The best framework, in my opinion, is Patrick Lencioni's 5 behaviors. It comes from the 5 dysfunctions of a team, which is a book he wrote a while back. But the 5 behaviors, which is, I think it's like trust, conflict, accountability, commitment, and results. And the framework that he has around that, it's great. And it brings people down to the very basic levels of what it means to have a good professional relationship that's based on accountability and trust. It's fantastic.
Before I let you go, I asked the same question to Barry Asen on the last show on Take the Stage, and I want to get your thoughts on this. In 2025 and going forward, can the small to mid-sized staffing firm keep up with the Goliaths in the room?
Yeah, I think they can. I think okay. My take on it is this, is that I look at staffing firms in kind of these different buckets, right? You have the kind of the transactional staffing firms, which focus on the VMS business. And that's a very data driven business. You have to be able to manage a lot of job orders. You have to get a lot of candidates out there. You have to do it fast. Right. And then you go to more of the consultative business, which is more based on relationship and customer intimacy. And then you have the niche based staffing firm, which is, look, I'm going to focus on a niche that's so hard to find. You're going to knock down my door trying to work with me. Right. Those type of companies. That's how Mark Eldridge started his business. Right. I think the latter two will be able to survive. I think the transactional firms are going to probably be inside for the most disruption. So if I was starting a staffing firm, I'd focus more on the value added side than on the transactional side, because I've always viewed this ever since the VMS came out. It's like, there's this dichotomy of data and relationships, right? In terms of how we manage our business, how we approach our business. Are we a relationship oriented business or are we a data oriented business? The data oriented businesses are the ones that are most vulnerable to automation, to AI, to those things. The relationship driven businesses are still vulnerable, but less so. So I do think there's a space for it. You just got to pick a really good niche and be really disciplined in the strat.
Mike, before I get you to our rapid fire round, I want to give you the floor to tell everyone a little bit about yourself and Charted Path.
Yeah, so I've been in staffing since 94. I worked at a company called MDI Group. We grew it to about 65 million. I was president when I left there in 2009. Then I started doing management consulting, which is what I'm doing today. And so when I started doing management consulting, it was primarily on management systems and things like that. But now I focus primarily on everything to drive growth within the organization both from a strategy standpoint, and organizational structure standpoint. I work boards. I chair boards, quite a bit of boards. I work with chief executives on scaling their operations. I work with their line level managers on management systems and things like that to scale. So my whole focus is on growth. On the flip side, I also manage SIA's Growth Advisory Board, which is like a peer advisory group. We have about 28 companies in that right now, ranging in sizes from about 10 to about 200 million. And we meet twice a month, and we just process issues and just, try anything that's kind of these barriers to growth. And so that's basically it. I guess you can call me a growth consultant. I guess that's what you're a growth coach, something like that is what I do.
Excellent. All right, Mike, rapid fire round for you. One book that has fundamentally changed your life.
Well, it's funny, there's no question that Kaplan's book, and this is going to be it's going to sound stale, but I'm going to try to give you some color with it. So Kaplan's book on the balanced scorecard completely changed how I view the business and how to manage the business and things like that operationally, and how to scale and how to manage people and the role of mission, vision, and values as a system in place. And so that's how I started my consulting business, was trying to implement those things, right, within organizations. However, it is about 25% of the story. And so when I got into it, it made me want to, I was president of the company when I left to do consulting. And I was so passionate about this management system. I was like, you know what? I'm going to take this to staffing. But the fact of the matter is that the issue is that if you lead with a system, then what you do is you try to cram people into your system. Doesn't work. So I take it into account now, and I look back at it and I kind of smile about how, I guess, naive I was in terms of the approach. But it did make me look at, what I was really passionate about and what I really wanted to do and really want to help companies grow and really help people develop. Because to me, a growing company means growing people. So it's that's what I want, right? I want people to grow. I want them uncomfortable. I want them to get a little bit better. I want them to be able to buy a house and do all these different things and have a great culture and all that kind of stuff. And so, so that's why I got into what I did. So it opened that door. But it didn't take me very long to realize how limiting it was in terms of a solution and trying to work with different executives and different staffing firms. It has a place, but it's not everything.
You're speaking my language there. I often say my favorite book is The Slight Edge, and all about getting 1% better in key areas of your life every single day. And if you can compound 1% better every single day, then you string together a pretty good year and you string together a pretty good life.
Absolutely. Yeah. That's great. Isn't the Atomic Habits is kind of a similar type.
Correct.
That's definitely the case. I always think that, To Sell as Human is also a great book, by the way. I don't know if you've read that book. That's an excellent book because it breaks the stereotypes of what it means to be a great salesperson, in terms of the introvert and extrovert. But I think that the idea, and this is what I'm trying to get across to my kids as well, is you should always be uncomfortable, because if you're uncomfortable, it means you're learning something. And complacency is that's when you should be worried, and maybe that's just this paranoia that I have, but I always feel like I have to be uncomfortable. I have to feel like I'm doing something I wouldn't normally do. And I think that's really important as well.
Yeah. And I will say just one more book for you and the listener, because everyone, I say it on the show every single time, as much as I'm helping you grow your library, I really am just growing mine over here. And I get to sit down with people like Mike every single episode and build out my library over here. I've been working through 4,000 Weeks by Oliver Burkeman, which is a framework of, if you think about the average life expectancy, we only get about 4,000 weeks. And it's really sort of shifted every single week I have to try to put the best foot forward, because 4,000 weeks is really not that much time.
It's really not, right? And the problem is too, man, is that as you get older, time goes faster. It objectively goes faster.
It's funny you say that, because I have a 3-year-old and a 6-month-old, and I was just talking to some coworkers actually on the drive here as we were about to record this episode. One of our, a friend of mine, coworker here at Haley, his son is 18 now. And he was commenting about how fast time has flown by, and that he remembers, when his kid was my son's age at 3. I was like, buddy, I know how fast 3 years has gone. I can only imagine how much faster it's going to compound on itself.
It does. I mean, you just think back when you're a kid, how long summers lasted now. And now it's it seems like a short vacation,
Right.
And so yeah, absolutely. Be very, very protective over your time. And as you get older, time becomes more and more valuable than money in a lot of ways too, right? So you look at money a little bit differently as well.
Exactly right.
Yeah.
One more question for you, my friend. One piece of advice that you would give to somebody just starting in staffing and recruiting.
So are they starting a business, or are they starting their own business, or just getting into the business, like as a recruiter or salesperson?
let's say for sake of this question, they are just getting into staffing and recruiting, getting into it. So they're not starting a business, just getting into the industry.
So what I will tell you is that staffing is an amazing business, and that is that you're going to learn so much about yourself, both your strengths and your weaknesses. And I always tell people, it's like if you have a chink in the armor somewhere, it's going to be exposed in this business, that there's no hiding. So you've got to be authentic, and you've got to realize you're not going to bat 1,000. Don't build up any pretenses, because they're going to be torn down. But if you're able to do those things, you're going to have a great ride. It's a lot of fun, and you're going to get a lot of satisfaction out of it. But you're going to have really, really hard days. But you're also going to have amazing days. So just get ready for it. And that's why people know, like, within the first 6 months, whether they're lifers or not, honestly, and that's the great thing about it. But yeah, it's the other part of it too. It's like, you're going to get training, you're going to get those things, but you really are running your own little business in a lot of ways. And you got to kind of have that level of accountability to think that way, as well, and not think like, well, why am I not getting this, that, or the other? It's like, no, think about solutions, think about how to improve things, think about getting better. Don't think about what you don't have available to you. Think about, I call it the attitude of abundance. Just have that attitude of abundance.
He's Mike Cleland, the founder of Charted Path. Mike, can't thank you enough for coming on, take the stage and sharing all your insights with us, my friend.
No, I enjoyed it. You have a great weekend.
You too.